The U.S. Space Force plans to develop a global monitoring system to track objects up to 22,000 miles away from Earth to counter-challenge China and Russia in the field of both ground-based and space-based weapons targeting satellites. The U.S. is also developing directed energy systems to counter ballistic missiles, hypersonic cruise missiles, and hypersonic glide vehicles. Violent rainfall caused historic floods in European countries. Taipei was bombarded by record rainfall followed by flooded underpasses, while Atami, Japan, sees houses swept to the sea by mudslides caused by heavy rain above the average scale. In the meantime, the west coast of America is baking under extreme high-temperature heat waves. Mother Earth is striking back. The European Commission unveiled a plan estimating that 35 million buildings in its 27 member states could be renovated by 2030, and 160,000 additional green jobs could be created in the construction sector by 2030. And companies importing into the EU have to pay a carbon price to avoid efforts to cut emissions that are undermined by unfair competition from abroad.
Hello, I'm Wade Lee. Thanks for watching FUNDAY News. Here are your top stories from this week. The US-China-Russia struggle for hegemony has been far-reaching into deep space. The United States is in talks with the United Kingdom about the Space Force disposition to establish a global network to monitor any potential attacks from the killer satellites of Beijing or Moscow.
Media reports on July 17th, the head of the British Royal Air Force, Air Chief Marshal Sir Michael Wixton, is in talks with the US over a radar station plan to monitor the activities by countries like China and Russia deploying and testing systems that look like weapons in space. The so-called Deep Space Advanced Radar Capability, or DARC in short, would require 3 radar stations around the globe with possible sites in the UK, US, and Australia in order to get a full picture of what is happening in the deep space up to 22,000 miles away from Earth. In low Earth orbit on January 11, 2007, China had intentionally destroyed its own weather satellite with a direct ascent anti-satellite missile. And Russia tested direct ascent anti-satellite missiles on July 15, 2020. General John Raymond, commander of U.S. Space Command, said that this is a further evidence of Russia's continuing efforts to develop and test space-based systems.
General John Raymond confirmed in a congressional hearing that the United States is currently developing directed energy systems to maintain America's space superiority. Internet media report last month, the U.S. Missile Defense Agency has researched using space-based laser to intercept ballistic missiles in the past. And some nations have ground-based lasers, dazzling weapons that blind on-orbit sensors.
A directed energy weapon is a ranged weapon that damages its target with highly focused energy, including laser, microwaves, and particle beams. Potential applications of this technology include weapons that target personnel, missiles, vehicles, and optical devices. In the United States, the Pentagon, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, the Air Force Research Laboratory, United States Army Armament Research Development and Engineering Center, and the Naval Research Laboratory are researching directed energy weapons and railguns to counter ballistic missiles, hypersonic cruise missiles, and hypersonic glide vehicles.
In this week's Life News, European leaders have blamed climate change for the recent floods during mid-July that has affected many European countries, including Germany, Belgium, Switzerland, Luxembourg, and the Netherlands. Experts say that global warming makes torrential rainfall more likely.
Violent rain caused flooding in Germany and Belgium that left at least 170 dead and hundreds missing. According to media reports, as of July 18th, at least 170 people are now confirmed to have died after historic flooding across Germany and Belgium, with fears the number will rise further as rescuers search for hundreds still missing. The worst affected regions include some of the most prosperous in Europe. The intensity and scale of the rainfall and the floods in Germany have shocked climate scientists who did not expect records to be broken this much over such a wide area or this soon.
Following July 18th heavy rainfall in West European countries, on the 21st of July, the capital of Henan Province, Zhengzhou, China, experienced 200 millimeters to 400 millimeters heavy rainfall and massive floodings, bursting the banks of river, overwhelming dams, and the public transportation system, and upending the lives of tens of millions. Video footage posted online showed entire neighborhoods covered in waist-deep water and vehicles floating in the muddy mire.
Before long, on July 3rd, in Atami, Japan, houses were swept away by the mudslide caused by a heavy rain. According to the Japan Meteorological Agency, 315 millimeters of rain were recorded in the 48-hour period on July 3rd in Atami, far exceeding the average monthly rainfall for July of 242.5 millimeters. And before Atami heavy rainfall and mudslide, on June 4, 2021, the districts of Da'an, Wenshan, Nangan, Neihu, and Xini of Taipei City were bombarded by sudden heavy rain accumulated more than 100 millimeters, while some had even seen over 200 millimeters of rain as well, and underpasses were flooded into deep ponds.
Scientists believe greenhouse gas CO2 emission is the cause for the record downpour and extreme weather. On 14 July 2001, the European Commission unveiled its plan to meet the 55% carbon emission reduction requirement by 2030, set by Kyoto Protocol, including more ambitious targets for reducing the CO2 emission of new cars and vans, and also to install infrastructure facilities for new vehicles to charge for short and long journeys.
The European Commission proposes 55% reduction of CO2 emissions from cars by 2030, 50% reduction in emissions from vans by 2030, and zero emissions from new cars by 2035. For reaching these goals, the Commission also promotes the growth of the market for zero and low emissions vehicles. In particular, it seeks to ensure that citizens have the infrastructure they need to charge these vehicles for any range of the journeys. In addition, from 2026, road transport in the 27 EU member states will be covered by emissions trading, putting a price on pollution, stimulating cleaner fuel use, and reinvesting in clean technologies.
The European Commission is also proposing carbon pricing for the aviation sector, which has been benefiting being the exception until now. It is also proposing to promote sustainable aviation fuels with an obligation for planes to take on sustainable blend fuels from all departures from EU airports, to ensure a fair contribution from the maritime sector to the efforts of decarbonizing our economy. The Commission proposed to extend carbon pricing to this sector. The Commission will also set targets for major ports to serve vessels with onshore power, reducing the use of polluting fuels that also harm our local air quality.
The European Commission estimates 35 million buildings could be renovated by 2030 and 160,000 additional green jobs could be created in the construction sector by 2030. The Commission believes that the electrification of the economy and the greater use of renewable energy are expected to generate higher employment in these sectors. Increasing the energy efficiency of buildings will also create jobs in construction with local labor in high demand.
On to pandemic news. The world average case fatality rate for COVID-19 pandemic is around 2%. Almost 98% of affected patients survive the disease. However, a new study finds 1/3 of the survivors forgetting the names of friends or being unable to focus, while another third struggled with depression and anxiety after the infection had passed.
This latest study was conducted by Chinese University in Hong Kong. Leading researcher Dr. Arthur Mak-Dong-Ping said the subject group of 128 Hong Kong patients ranged in age from their 20s to their 70s, while many had gone through their initial illness as long as 10 months ago. He said although 1/3 of patients had shown signs of anxiety, depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, and even suicidal tendencies, these are just preliminary findings and the study is not complete yet.
Dr. Mack is in charge of the Hong Kong arm of Global Study looking into the pandemic's impact. Similar previous studies found that recovering COVID-19 patients across the globe have reported cognitive impairment following infection. It's one of the many symptoms of post-COVID-19 syndrome, also known as long COVID.
According to a report by Long COVID Physio, a global peer support, education, and advocacy group of physiotherapists living with long COVID, there is growing evidence that the virus can cause damage to body organs, inflammation, and a broad spectrum of manifestations that can affect many different body systems, including the heart, lungs, and brain. The UK Office for National Statistics studied data from June 4th of 2021, estimating 1 million people in the UK self-report living with long COVID, and fatigue was the most common symptom reported, followed by shortness of breath, muscle ache, and difficulty concentrating.
And that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on FUNDAY News. Let's make every day a fun day. I'm Wade Lee, your host, and I'll see you next time.